We're so happy to be here with you today on the first Tuesday of every month. We have the Washington Brief, which is sponsored by the Washington Times Foundation, the Universal Peace Federation, and supported by the Washington Times. Our program will be covered by the Washington Times today and also will reach out across the world through millions of readers, but also coverage directly in Korea through our sister paper, the Sege Times and Yonhap News. We'll also be covering this, so it will be very relevant. Our program always focuses on Northeast Asia. Our moderator today is Ambassador Joseph DeTrani. He's a commentator on security issues and former special envoy for negotiations with North Korea, former director of the National Counter-Proliferation Center. An ambassador is also former associate director of national intelligence and special director to the director of national special advisor to the director of national intelligence. Prior to that, he was senior official at the CIA. Dr. Alexandre Mansourov is an adjunct professor of security studies at the Edmund A. Walsh School of Foreign Service in Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He's also an adjunct professor of Korean studies at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins University and the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University. One of the few people in the U.S. who holds advanced degrees from Moscow State University, Kim Il-sung University, as well as a doctorate from Columbia University. Honorable Dan Burton, one of our founders of this Washington Brief. Congressman Burton is currently the co-chairman of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, a project of the Universal Peace Federation International, about 5,000 active current legislators and congressmen from over 100 countries. And also Congressman Burton served on foreign affairs as a ranking member, as chairman of many of the subcommittees, especially on Asia and the Pacific. He has remained active in leadership for peace throughout the world. We're happy to welcome Senator Todd Young. I'll turn this back over to Ambassador DeTrani for our opening statements, and then he will turn it over to Congressman Burton to introduce our guest speaker. Welcome to our audience to the Washington Brief. Ambassador DeTrani.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins. This is a special session. I think this will be exciting today. Having Senator Young with us, certainly he will bring us up to speed on what's happening on the Korean Peninsula and in the Northeast area environment. Let me just set the scene very, very briefly. We've seen over the last few days, exactly on the 5th of June, North Korea launched 8 short-range ballistic missiles. And we saw the response from the United States and the Republic of Korea. We together with our South Korean allies, launched 8 surface-to-surface missiles. Significant developments in that regard. But a few weeks even before that, on the 25th of May, North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile, assessed to have the capability of reaching the whole of the United States. Efforts by the United States and our allies to get the UN Security Council to pass a resolution to sanction North Korea for that intercontinental ballistic missile launch and the other launches, all in violation of UN Security Council resolutions, failed because of the non-agreement of, if you will, the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation, where they did not agree to impose sanctions on North Korea. Most recently, the director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Director General, made it very clear that the Pyongyang nuclear test site, there's a new tunnel that's been opened up. And that lends itself to the sense we all have that in the short term, North Korea will have another nuclear test. This will be the 7th nuclear test. The last one was a thermonuclear test in 2017. Just yesterday, our Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, made it very clear in her meetings with her counterpart in Seoul that there would be a swift and forceful response to North Korea having a missile launch or indeed a nuclear test. But in this case, it's a nuclear test. A few weeks before that, a very successful visit of President Biden to Seoul and to Tokyo, meeting with Yoon Suk-yeol, talking about enhancing deterrence, doing more about deterrence, and then going into Seoul and going then from Seoul to Tokyo, talking about the relationship with Japan, all of us coming together but also a meeting of the Quad where we come together and work on these issues here. A lot going on in the region. So today's event, this is a special event, having Senator Todd Young with us to talk about these and other issues that relate to the security of the Korean Peninsula as we look at increased tension on the peninsula. I will now turn it over to Congressman Dan Burton, who will introduce the senator and start the conversation. Congressman Burton.
We're very fortunate in Indiana to have Todd Young as our senator, my senator. And I'm very pleased to have worked with Todd a little bit in the House before he elevated himself to the United States Senate. Todd, right out of high school, joined the Navy. And as he was in the Navy, he was appointed to the Annapolis, the Naval Academy. And he did an outstanding job there. He was a class officer. He graduated cum laude from the Naval Academy. And then after he got out of the Naval Academy, he became a United States Marine. I always question that because I was an Army man, but Todd did a great job as a Marine. And then he became active in politics. He worked with Senator Dick Lugar. He worked with the Heritage Foundation. He helped Governor Mitch Daniels be elected governor. And he did outstanding things for the people of Indiana. He then ran for the Congress of the United States, was elected, served 3 terms, and then he ran for the United States Senate, where he's done an outstanding job. He is the father of 4 children and has a beautiful wife, Jenny. And he lives, of course, in our great state of Indiana. The thing I really admire about Todd is that he is one of the people who has the ability to work across the aisle with Democrats in many cases. He's a conservative, but he doesn't just stop at the border. He really works with them to solve problems facing the people of Indiana as well as the people of America. I'm very pleased that he's with us today. He's a fine man, a young man, very articulate and very successful. And with that, Todd or Senator Young, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Congressman Burton, Chairman. You served our country with distinction so many years. I had the privilege of serving for 1 term with you in that co-equal chamber, the House of Representatives. It is great to see you, my friend. I also want to thank William Stoner and Michael Jenkins for the invitation to be with everyone today. Public interest in the state of affairs in the Korean Peninsula, we know, ebbs and flows. But as recent events demonstrate, from missile launches to political change, the challenges and opportunities on the peninsula persist. Today, I want to address why Congress, especially myself and my colleagues on the Foreign Relations Committee, continue to monitor events in the region and why we all believe that American leadership is essential at this period of time. First, it's obvious that stability on the Korean Peninsula is in our national interest. A stable peninsula increases the ability of the South Korean government to better deter against the Chinese Communist Party's growing desire to dominate all of East Asia. With its modern economy and its strong institutions and advanced military, South Korea, of course, has a major role to play in this generational challenge. But their ability to focus is made harder by the security threats the corrupt regime to the north poses. Similarly, stability increases the resiliency of the South Korean government to stand up to China's coercive activities in trade and business and in the maritime environment. Stability is vitally important to the Korean people, both the North Koreans and South Koreans. Stability increases the safety and opportunities for those in the South, while one day opening up the North to transparency, freedom, and prosperity. And lastly, stability is important to the American people because we have skin in the game. Similarly to how discussions about America's role in securing Taiwan must include Taiwan's role in the global economy, so too must these realities be reflected in our commitments to South Korea. For example, Samsung is a key player in the global supply of semiconductors. If they're threatened, every US industry will be implicated and affected, as we're seeing today with the chip shortage. As events over the weekend demonstrate, the threat from Kim Jong-un isn't going away, and resolving not only North Korea's nuclear threats, but its political future will be the topic of ongoing US discussions with our allies in the region. These are obviously very sensitive discussions, but it's clear that US policy in recent years has not been clear on what the goals of US policy are or how we will attain them. And I believe this needs to change. The American people rightfully demand not just competency, but also coherence in our foreign policy. I don't believe the Biden administration has prioritized the threat of a nuclear North Korea, and indeed maybe showing other malign regimes around the globe that we are asleep at the wheel as they seek their own nuclear arsenals. Events from just this weekend, the 18th test of this year, must be a wake-up call for the administration about the threat facing us from the north. Going forward, we need to balance a coherent strategy of engagement with one of restraint in this vital region of the world. The United States should be engaged with Japan and South Korea about what they're willing to contribute to Taiwan's defense and resiliency. The United States should be engaged with South Korea and Japan, and as necessary, China and Russia too, about the future of the Kim regime, which is obviously blocking any serious progress towards a more stable peninsula. On the other hand, we should be restrained in how we seek to weigh in on South Korea and Japan's protracted stalemate in relations. We cannot fully pursue some of the policies I laid out earlier if these two allies cannot mend their own bridges. To demonstrate restraint in this regard will be the United States showing our allies that we not only respect their own political processes, but also that we cannot arbitrate every single issue. It will be up to the new governments in Tokyo and Seoul to compromise, to move past this challenging chapter in their bilateral relationship, and to be productive partners in the decades to come. Now, for 70 years, US Forces Korea has been the bedrock of security on the Korean Peninsula. While not an easy process, I applaud the work that the Trump administration started, in which the current administration finished, on securing a new agreement with the South Korean government that increases their burden sharing while providing clarity on the US presence on the peninsula. As the recent missile launches demonstrate, both US forces and our Korean allies are capable and willing to stand up to Kim's threats. Our Korean allies understand and they appreciate the commitments the United States has made to preserving stability, and I hope to build upon this. I'm encouraged by the pledge by recently elected President Yoon to strengthen and deepen the bilateral relationship. I believe we have a real opportunity with a willing partner in Seoul to open a new chapter on US relations to both South Korea and North Korea and work towards a peaceful unification and denuclearization of the peninsula. His stated willingness to actively work alongside the United States is a promising step in that direction. In short, we are in a period of opportunity and challenge. We cannot allow US policy to creep into preservation of the status quo as it relates to the Kim regime, which has brutalized and threatened the Korean people for generations. At the same time, we must continue working constructively towards denuclearization. Where these two ends conflict, the United States must do a better job of coherently prioritizing our goals for a sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula. In conclusion, I really look forward to the discussion today on how we should be thinking about these questions and what our priorities and goals should be. Thanks so much once again for the opportunity to speak and to discuss these pressing issues.
Thank you so much, Senator Young. Outstanding comments. much to discuss, and I'm going to look to Dr. Mansourov to start the discussion and some questions for the senator. Please, Dr. Mansourov.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador, and welcome, Senator, to the Washington Times program. It's a real honor to have you with us today, and I'm particularly intrigued by your comment on the chip shortage in the United States. My daughter graduated from Notre Dame University in the state of Indiana, your state of Indiana, and I wanted to give you a present, buy her first car. And guess what? When we were shopping, we realized that, there is nothing in stock. New cars and old cars are very pricey. And the wait is like 2, 3, 4 months long because of the shortage of chips. And I know you wrote a lot and you did a lot to alleviate this problem because the shortage of chips really is hurting this country. And so I'm really interested in your views on what can be done, to restore America's lead in the 21st century's critical technologies so that we can outsmart and outcompete our rivals, China, Russia, not only economically, but militarily, and alleviate those problems, hurting American consumers.
Well, thanks so much for the question, Doctor, and it's such an important matter. In short, we need to pass the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, the China competitiveness legislation that is being conferenced right now between the Senate and House. This legislation would accomplish a number of important goals, but as it relates to chips, which are essentially the feedstock to a modern economy, they are arguably more important than oil to a modern economy right now. And it's ironic that U.S. taxpayers invested significantly in inventing chips, in scaling up their development in the Silicon Valley area post-World War II. And over the years, we gave away the keys to the kingdom. And now all of the advanced semiconductor, the chips, the microprocessors that are used in our missile systems, that are used for our most advanced technologies, all of them are developed overseas. Many of them on the cusp of the People's Republic of China and Taiwan and some in Korea. Of course, the Taiwanese, the Koreans, they are strong allies of ours, but these companies, Intel, so many others, TSMC, they need to respond to their owners. They're going to invest their chip fabrication capabilities where they can earn the biggest bang for the buck. So we need to incentivize their location as a matter of national security on our shore. And one component of this U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, one of 3 pillars, is incentivizing these fabricating plants to locate here. We allocate billions of dollars, doing essentially what the Chinese Communist Party is now doing, and the Europeans and our friends and adversaries alike, right? And this is analogous to the way a governor tries to entice employers into their states. If you're not in the game, if you're not offering some measure of incentives, you won't have that domestic capacity. You won't have a location on your soil. This hits home, of course, as you alluded to. We've have auto assembly plants in the state of Indiana that have idled in recent months, putting Hoosier workers out of work, making our automobile production capacity much less efficient, driving up the costs of all kinds of things, reducing supply. If you try and buy an auto these days, if you can get your hands on one, in short order, which is very rare, it's often missing certain features like seat warmers. So we can at once fix these challenges, which are really relatable to most Americans, and also redevelop the ability to manufacture national security critical components that go into our missile systems and next generation weaponry. If we pass up this opportunity to pass the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act and its CHIPS component, we can't assume that we're going to be able to get our act together in the run up to a presidential election year after November. Moreover, even if we wait a number of months, 6 months, it takes 2 years to build one of these fabricating plants. So there's a real urgency. And I would emphasize the Chinese Communist Party. They have a sense of urgency. They have a plan. It's called China 2025. This is our plan, U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. So anyone who's watching this and who feels passionately about this issue and finds what I'm saying important and compelling, I encourage you to get in touch with your U.S. senators, with your members of the House, and say, sign me up. This is a critical national security investment we need to make for our country.
Thank you. Is that part of your arsenal of democracy that you were talking about, the rebuilding of the chip manufacturing in this country?
It is. I mean, listen, this is not breaking some new ground on a newfangled economics. We're just revisiting our post-World War II economic success. We invested in ourselves, in our people, in our workforce. We invested in next generation technologies. And because of that, we have an aerospace industry here in the United States that spins off $1 trillion+ of value a year. When you talk about bang for the buck, we dominate certain areas in the private sector of technology. Just visit Silicon Valley or Boston's Route 128 or the Research Triangle. But there's so much untapped potential in this country. So we need to retrain our people. And we also have failed to make critical national security technology investments in some of these technologies that frankly don't have much of a consumer demand. Hypersonics, quantum computing. We really need to up our game. Shame on us if we don't have a bias for action.
Wow, these are outstanding comments, Senator Young. You mentioned China 2025. This is exactly where Xi Jinping is going. He's saying he's going to dominate. China will dominate the major industries. And you're saying that's not going to be the case because the U.S. has been in the lead and we must remain in the lead.
We must be in the lead, and we have an opportunity. We know this from our nation's history, even our recent history, that if the U.S. leads, others will follow too.
Yes.
If we think about this competition as the United States with our few hundred million people and our dynamism and so forth versus the state capitalist Chinese model with all their people and benefits, I think we probably still win that, but that's the wrong way to think about it. It ought to be the West, broadly defined versus China. We win every time. But for that to happen, the U.S. is going to have to lead on a number of fronts. This is one of those fronts. We're going to have to continue to invest in our military. We'll have to continue to deepen our alliance system. Trade. We're going to have to responsibly get back into the trade game in the Pacific in particular. But we I think most of us understand the playbook. Not all of these issues have popular resonance. So it's the job of our elected leaders to do what past generations have, which is go out there and make the hard arguments and say, this has to be done. This has to be done for our children and grandchildren. And if that happens, we'll make the requisite pivot here in history. We'll invest in ourselves. We'll grow faster. We'll defend our values. And we'll make sure that this century is the second American century.
Thank you, Senator Young.
One of the features of the past summit was the fact that President Biden, for the first time, instead of going out to the DMZ, he actually visited the Samsung manufacturing facility and met with the Samsung chairman and CEO and observed, the most advanced manufacturing process in the South. And Samsung decided to invest over $5 billion in the United States, here in Georgia, in the chip making production plant. So that's something new, and that's really important.
Absolutely, Doctor. So that just underscores the point that, and I think the president was right to make that visit, that economic security in the 21st century, technological, leadership is national security. But in order for us to maintain our technological leadership and our economic security, we of course need to harness the best of our system, broad and deep capital markets, creative entrepreneurs, so forth. But we cannot forget that we also need to have a sufficient amount of investment in our workforce through government, and also investment in basic research and applied research, which is what the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act requires. Moreover, to your earlier line of questioning, we need to make more resilient our supply chain, from microprocessor chips to, PPP, right? Or PPE, rather.
There you go. Thank you, Senator. Let's go to Congressman Dan Burton, if you would, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. One of the biggest concerns that people in Indiana and people across the country are concerned about is going on between Russia and Ukraine, and whether or not that might lead to China taking aggressive steps toward Taiwan. Now, President Biden recently was in Japan, and he talked to the leadership there in Korea. And I just wanted to get your take on what you think the situation is and how we should address the potential of a conflict across the Taiwan Straits involving Taiwan, possibly Japan, maybe even some of the other countries in that area. So this is a real tricky thing. And you, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, maybe has some ideas that we could listen to.
Well, thanks so much, Dan. I agree that this is a period. This is a spike in vulnerability. When you have one conflict going on, the risk obviously would be that there's a perception that we have too many things going on politically, institutionally, and government, too many military assets, otherwise committed, so we're going to have to harden ourselves against this. There's a few different ways that come to mind. Number one, we need to make sure that we expedite all the promised weapon systems. Many of them aren't particularly advanced, but expedite them to Taiwan. The government has been incredibly patient, but our reassurances don't do a whole lot for them. So we need to get them the systems. We've already planned them. And many of these are just, frankly, low-cost, asymmetric systems like the ones that are benefiting the Ukrainians in their fight against Russians. That will help deter an attack. We should also probably be giving some sort, in conjunction with some more flexibility with our procurement system to get those out the door. We should be looking at foreign military financing, foreign military sales for the Taiwanese, stand a new program up so that they can buy, the higher end, more sophisticated weaponry where needed. That's something some of my colleagues have some proposals, and I've been in touch with the administration about maybe doing this in conjunction with the NDAA this year. We, of course, need to do something that the administration has been placing a lot of emphasis on, which is making sure that we have a broader, deeper alliance system to do some burden sharing. And so I think it's been very smart spending the time that has been spent in Japan and South Korea, formalizing the Quad relationship and trying to reinvigorate that. And I would say, at the more tactical level compared to the broader things I've been speaking to, our military services will need to change how they fight if we're really poised for a strategic competition against the Chinese and working with our allies to ensure that they too are not on the receiving end of Chinese Communist Party aggression. So the Marine Corps has led the way on this, and I really do commend General Berger, the current commandant, and his team for putting forward a proposal to prepare for this competition as opposed to always fighting the last war.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator, thank you for those comments. Senator, let me pivot to North Korea and China. China is an ally of North Korea. In fact, North Korea's only ally is the People's Republic of China. And they just reconstituted their peace and friendship treaty just this past year. And Xi Jinping has been working closely with Kim Jong-un, a number of visits back and forth. Certainly subsequent to the 2019 summit, I should say, between President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in Hanoi. So China, in many ways, not only is an ally of North Korea, but they are the lifeline for North Korea. 90% of the trade, 90% of the crude oil, it all comes from China. So my question to you, Senator, is this. Can China be doing more to get North Korea to come back to negotiations, to get North Korea to stop its escalation? Why is China not using the leverage they have?
In the state of Indiana, we call this a layup. Yes, they absolutely can and should be doing more. So one of the China could cut off the source of private wealth that Kim Jong-un has access to. He can cut off many of the lifelines to his economy, energy resources, for example. And unfortunately, the Chinese have not been doing this. I really think that diplomatically, if the administration is looking for an area in which to partner with the Chinese Communist Party, and I don't think that categorically that's a bad idea. I just don't think it should be green energy or climate reduction right now. I would say this is among the top tier of priorities, is working with them to help stabilize the Korean Peninsula and more broadly the Pacific by applying more leverage against their leader. So I think that's a play that should be made diplomatically. I know so many things have been tried over the years, but I do feel like at this period of time that the administration might have some success if it made that their top priority as opposed to some of the other the climate initiatives they have.
So Senator, if I understood you correctly, you agree that China has the leverage to do all these things. You mentioned the administration hopefully working even more constructively with China to get China to move on this issue.
Yes, I think it could be more focused, and it doesn't have to be just the United States trying to persuade China, of course. Here again, the Quad construct could be very helpful. The Quad has all sorts of different working groups, and there is, I suspect, a working group that pertains to engagement on North Korean issues. So to the extent other members of the Quad could also leverage their various relationships and points of influence with the Chinese Communist Party to, in turn, cut off the sustenance of the North Korean regime, I think that would be helpful. This is going to be a constant theme as you speak with me about some of these different things. It's the United States has done a lot. We have led from the front for generations around the world, and we need to continue to. But we are going to have to be smarter, I think, about working by, with, and through some other large economy countries who we're allied with. And this is another example of where I think collectively we could make a difference if there was more focus with respect to the U.S.-China relationship.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alexander.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador. And I'd like to also kind of sharpen the focus on the Biden administration's policy towards North Korea a little bit, if you permit. Now, as you know, North Korea is experiencing chronic economic difficulties. They just announced an outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. They live under harsh international sanctions, and yet they continue to modernize the WMD arsenal at a fairly steady pace. Due to the changing geopolitical realities, the United States can no longer count, in my opinion, on either China or Russia to restrain or dissuade the Kim regime from further nuclear missile buildup or military provocations. On the opposite, I would expect that the U.S. adversaries will move to encourage, if not enable, Pyongyang's quote-unquote bad behavior in order to put pressure on Washington and its allies in Northeast Asia. So here is my question. Do you think that the Biden administration's strategic patience 2.0 approach towards North Korea is really working? And if not, what else can the United States do to contain the growing North Korean threat and alleviate security tensions in the region? Thank you.
Yes. Well, to continue with first, the answer is no. It's not working. You know, we should judge these sorts of we should judge policies based on their outcomes, and I know there are a lot of distractions around the world which contribute to missile launches and other things. So there are exogenous factors. I recognize that the world's a complicated place, but goodness gracious, 18 launches so far this year. That's I think that's demonstrative of the fact that this current policy is not working. So listen, in the past, we've not had any great breakthroughs. So I'm not sure I can give you a 10-point plan. There's been a mix of sanctions, of person-to-person engagement, of targeted relief in the past. In terms of the strategy that they are taking, though, listen, I think this just needs to remain at the top of the list of priorities. This is what my former boss for about a year and a half, Dick Lugar, lamented as the nexus of evil. This is, horrible dictators, horrible regimes getting access to weapons of mass destruction. And he even ran for president of the United States on this platform. So many people thought he was out of touch, but I think history has demonstrated that that was indeed, and today it remains among the most important national security priorities. So this has to be at the top of the list. It's something the administration should be communicating about. It's something that in every meeting with Asian leaders needs to be discussed among the very top items. And I don't have the reassurance that it is. And in fairness, we here in Congress, those of us who identify topics to hold hearings on, probably need to pay more attention to this as well.
So can I follow up on that, Senator, and then I'll look to Congressman Burton. Senator, you mentioned the WMD, and you're right on the mark. There's no question. 18 launches, 6 nuclear tests. We're looking at a 7th nuclear test, and given what Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman just said, there will be swift and forceful response from the U.S. and the Republic of Korea. Well, the tension is rising on that. Let me ask you a question on proliferation per se. North Korea is in the business of making money, either selling nuclear. We saw them sell missiles to Libya, to Iran, et cetera. We saw them in the narcotics business and other businesses, illicit businesses. What about proliferation of nuclear weapons and fissile material? How confident are we that we are monitoring sufficiently to ensure that North Korea doesn't do what they did in Syria and Al-Kabar, where they were providing technical assistance to the Syrians to build a nuclear reactor? How confident are we that North Korea is not proliferating nuclear technology or fissile material?
Gosh, anytime you get on a panel to discuss North Korea, they're very hard questions. But listen, I know that this is public, so I can say I don't have the level of confidence that would be required to reassure my constituents or the American people. The IAEA does the best they can with the mandates that they have, and frankly, with the inability to forcefully insert themselves into situations. So between that and in our intelligence communities, we do the best we can. But when you have a state like North Korea that basically puts, aside from the resources designed to ensure that their dear leader has a life of convenience and comfort, put all of their resources into security. it's very challenging to get transparency, to get visibility into all the malign and nefarious activities. But all the more reason to have more vectors into their society by partnering with more allies and including the Chinese to get that sort of visibility. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention at all in this time how great it is that the U.S. partnered with the South Koreans. Let's commend President Yu for sending a very strong message in the wake of this most recent launch by responding in kind and demonstrating that there's a new sheriff in town.
Yes.
I regret that I'm going to have to go, but I'll take one last question if you give me leave from Congressman Burton, and I'll try and keep it tight. Yes.
Well, first of all, Senator Todd, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know right now this is a very difficult time for you guys on the Hill, so we appreciate it. The one thing that I'd like to ask real quickly in closing, evidently some Chinese banks have been doing some business with North Korea in their nuclear program. And I was wondering, is there anything that we could do regarding sanctions to put pressure on Chinese banks to stop doing that?
There may be, and if we're not doing it, I think that's something we should be looking real closely at. So why don't I like a little bit of homework. So how about we'll get in touch with you. You might have volunteered yourself to offer counsel on that matter, and perhaps we can find a path to doing it the right way. So thank you so much again, and.
We're very proud of you in Indiana.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I would like to continue this great discussion. Senator Young certainly put a lot on the table for us to consider and to discuss. These are very significant issues. And I'd like to turn first to Alexandre. I mean, Alexandre, you talked about COVID-19 now and the virus. North Korea has now admitted to over 3 million of their people have been infected. Some have died. Why do you think Kim Jong-un finally has sort of opened up this dialogue on something he's been denying for a few years, that North Korea was not affected by the coronavirus? Now he's admitting it. Is this, you think this is sort of an approach or some sort of an opening for the US and the Republic of Korea to engage with North Korea to provide vaccines and humanitarian assistance? Could this be an opening that he's giving us, or is there other reasons behind his admittance that the coronavirus is in North Korea?
Thank you, Ambassador. This is an interesting question. Of course, I'll need to do some more research on the background of it. But to begin with, I don't believe any numbers coming out of North Korea. So when they say 3 million, it could be 20 million, it could be 3,000. So this is just, bogus numbers for me. 69 people died, it could be 69,000. Again, all these numbers, I just don't take them seriously to begin with. Now, whether they have a flu, a fever, or real COVID-19, again, I don't really know. And I'm not in the habit of believing everything I hear from Pyongyang, even though these days it's politically expedient to kind of take them at face value, that indeed maybe they're coping with an outbreak of COVID-19. I don't think so. So again, that's aside. It's a serious matter. I'm not really prepared to discuss it in detail. I see it more not as an opening for us, South Korea, the United States, or Japan. We did offer them some assistance, medical assistance, vaccines, and all that, and they rejected that offer, which again probably reveals some security concerns on their part, some mistrust, but also lack of intention to really engage us on this issue. I think it's part of the conversation with China, and it's kind of geared to whatever is happening in the North Korean-Chinese relationship. But I'll be happy to discuss it at some other point in the future when dust settles and we'll be able to see really, what transpired. As of this moment, to me, it's part of theatrics. Again, it's a serious matter, so I don't want to overemphasize it. But all the numbers, I'm very skeptical about the numbers. If you don't,
Go right ahead, Alexander.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Because I wanted to make actually a couple of observations. And the first one is that we're really back to the zero-sum security dynamics in Northeast Asia, reminiscent of the regional Cold War. On the one hand, at the May 21st summit, President Biden and President Young, they tightened U.S.-South Korean military alliance. They broadened our economic partnership into a global comprehensive alliance. But on the other hand, under the new president in South Korea, the Republic indeed pivoted. He calls it a pivotal state, but they pivoted, in my opinion, from a universal globalist foreign policy towards the Western alliance system, essentially by disengaging from Russia, by distancing from China. Now, if you look at the Russian-South Korean relationship, essentially it's back to the near Cold War-like posture. South Korea not only condemned Russia for its actions in Ukraine, it imposed economic and financial sanctions, essentially cut off trade, cut off investment, disengaged from the Russian market, now supplies humanitarian aid and even armaments to Ukraine. Now Yoon is going to NATO summit. The PPP chairman is in Kiev. Essentially now Russia lists South Korea as an unfriendly or hostile state. So the relationship really is hostile, and Seoul should not be surprised if Moscow begins to provide substantial, I'm talking about substantial economic and military assistance to North Korea, whether openly or clandestinely, to kind of put pressure on the United States and South Korea. Again, South Korean-Chinese relationship under enormous stress right now, not only because of South Korean decision to join the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, excluding China, to cooperate with Quad against the Chinese interests. Again, South Korean-US consultations on Taiwan. They all can be seen as, and the Chinese said so, they're damaging the Chinese-South Korean relationship. Now, Russian-Japanese relationship hit the rock bottom, which we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. Not just the territorial claims are revived. Japan's prime minister is going to meet with NATO counterparts, impose sanctions, rearmaments, and all that. So, again, it's no wonder that North Korea senses the opportunity that they can get back into the, very habitual, traditional mode of operation with China and Russia during the Cold War, tightening their alliance, and basically count on those two great powers to underwrite whatever pursuits they engaged in on the nuclear and missile front. So, in my opinion, Northeast Asia is faced with accelerating region-wide arms race and military buildups and military exercises intensifying. The diplomatic space for political dialogue, for diplomatic negotiations is shrinking rapidly. Economically, the region is bifurcated and is being split into consolidating economic blocks. And so, unfortunately, the United States, I'm about to finish here, but it's
go ahead. Go ahead, Alan. Okay.
That America, unfortunately, is no longer playing the leadership role in Northeast Asia. Why? Again, that's not what I think, but if you look at China, Russia, North Korea, they're charting their own course, challenging the US rules-based regional order. And the US is basically distracted by the deepening crisis in Europe. So my question really is, and then I'll stop, whether the United States can recover its regional leadership role at the time of worsening economic troubles at home, culture wars here, foreign policy mistakes, and this deepening European quagmire, not just for Russia, not just for Europe, but for us as well. Can we really do it and re-engage?
Thank you, Alexander, for your analysis on these important issues. And I'm going to look to Congressman Burton on this, but let me just comment a little on some of the points you made, which I think are very important points, obviously. North Korea, for some years, going back to the agreed framework in 1994, has been looking at a relationship with the United States, but also looking at improvement of relations going back to 1991, the North-South Agreement, improving relations with South Korea. So, and I think we're not surprised when we see the agreed framework. We did have an agreement in September of 2005. When we had President Donald Trump meeting with two important summits, one in Singapore that was I thought very productive, and then one in Hanoi that didn't go the way it should have gone. In retrospect, things could have been done differently and so forth. But I think one had a sense that North Korea was looking to not just be dependent on China and Russia, but looking to the United States, looking to South Korea, and looking to the European Union to open up their optic in many different ways. Now things have changed, and what we've seen since the Hanoi summit in 2019 is North Korea now refusing to engage with the United States, refusing to engage with South Korea. Launching intercontinental ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, submarine launch ballistic missiles, sort of going beyond the pale what they're doing, and now looking at a possible seventh nuclear test. These are all very concerning issues and so forth. But I think a core element here was North Korea, for a period of time, was reaching out to the United States, South Korea. And I think the West to open up their relationships in a significant way. And I think we should hold on to that, and hopefully that will come in. But, when it comes to the Yoon Suk-yeol government, the administration, and the Biden, on the 21st of May, the meetings between President Biden and President Yoon, I think what we're seeing now is talking about enhancing deterrence, enhancing missile defense, more cooperation, bringing Japan into the equation. It's a logical reaction to what we're seeing from North Korea. How could we expect South Korea to do, and how could China and others be telling South Korea, why are you looking at a stronger missile defense? Well, it's pretty obvious why you're looking at a stronger missile defense. Why are you looking at a greater deterrence? It's pretty obvious when North Korea is launching short-range ballistic missiles that possibly can carry a nuclear weapon. So I think there are so many pieces in play, Alexander. Your points are very good. And that's why we need to sit at the table. We have to come back, whether it's bilateral, whether it's with South Korea, whether it's reconstituting the six-party process, including maybe the European Union. But we need to have a dialogue to sort of diffuse some of this extreme tension. But with that, Congressman Burton, how do you see these issues? Further to Dr. Mansorov's comments.
Well, I think you gentlemen have come up with a lot of points that are very important. The thing that I gathered today from this meeting with Senator Todd Young is that if we could just reach out to senators, both Democrats and Republicans, and pose some of these questions to them. I know we're not going to be able to get them all to come and be on a program with us like Todd did, but if we could figure out a way through the Washington Times or through these meetings like we're having right now, to get senators to pick their brains, number one, number two, also to give them some thoughts on how they can contact their counterparts in South Korea and Japan, and create some kind of an approach that will put pressure on North Korea and China to solve these problems. Right now, you and I and the professor, we have some ideas that we think would work. But the people that are really going to be able to get the job done are our leaders in the executive branch and in the Senate and the House. So if we could figure out some way to stimulate them on these issues, I know we'd love to get them on the program, but if we can't get them on the program, at least find some way to have a dialogue with them that will stimulate them to reach out to their counterparts in Japan, South Korea, and China for that matter.
Yes, those are excellent comments, Congressman Burton, right on the mark. And I think, Dr. Jenkins, having Senator Todd Young here today, I think that's a very a good indicator that further to Congressman Burton's comments here, if we can get some of our congressional leaders and some of the administration come to this session here, but also to become that much more engaged with their counterparts, whether it's in the Republic of Korea, Japan, or the People's Republic of China, or what have you. I think that all makes a lot of sense. So I think this is good. This has been an excellent discussion. I think Senator Todd Young put a lot on the table here. And I think there's so much, we're in a period now, and literally we're sitting in this period now when we hear our Deputy Secretary of State saying there will be swift and forceful responses to a North Korea nuclear test. And all this, the sense all of us have is that there will be, to include possibly the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, that it looks like there will be another seventh nuclear test. So tension is really rising exponentially here, and that needs to be diffused. So what a great discussion. And I want to thank the Washington Times Foundation, certainly Dr. Michael Jenkins and his staff for permitting us to have this important discussion with our colleagues around the world, because this affects all countries, all people. It's not just the US, it's not just the ROK. This is an issue that affects all countries. And we need to keep very, very much well informed on these issues and input whenever we can. So over to you, Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Ambassador DeTrani, and thank you to all of our panelists. Congressman Burton, thank you for introducing Senator Todd Young to the Washington Brief. And Dr. Mansourov, always your insights are right on target. Joe, you're really helping us explore different angles of the North Korea situation. And I felt like Senator Young today also was very positive and had positive steps that could be taken now to cooperate with China, which is not something you usually hear. And he's right, though. He's right. China does not want North Korea to have full nuclear capability. They're not addressing it the way they could. And there are things that Senator Todd Young was making it very clear that could be done. Technology development and also working with the Quad much more. Excellent insights. And we have a lot to talk about. And Congressman Burton, I also felt for the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, Senator Young was quite clear the many partnerships and vectors that are needed to engage China and North Korea. So the Quad, that they have different interests, that they're not just like America, but they're joined with America. And then you've got the 5,000 parliamentarians that represent over 100 nations. If we start to get them in kind of in a coordinated, agreement, which they do agree with us on denuclearization of North Korea. If we start to have an agreement on that, I think, Dan, your role could be incredibly important, increasing those vectors of engagement. And Joe, I think we're ready for a program with some Chinese representatives for the Washington Brief. I think it would be very excellent to start engaging, and the Russian representatives when the time comes too. We really need to explore possibilities and solutions. The Washington Times is covering this today. I want to thank Guy Taylor and Ben Wolfgang. Their coverage has been excellent every time. It goes right to all of our 12 million unique readers and then expands virally. Our program today also is on YouTube, and it has a beautiful Washington Times brief frame and your names in the lower third, which is properly done. It didn't work for the panel backstage, but it worked online. So when you go to YouTube, we have a very good product to share and to multiply, and it will go viral. And I think it can go viral to hundreds of thousands of people. Our videos usually do. After a while, they start to pass around. So I think we should emphasize this more. I think we learned a lot today. I want to thank Chris Dolan, the president of the Washington Times, for his support for the Washington Brief. Tom Walsh at the Universal Peace Federation always is endorsing and supporting our efforts. So I want to thank our audience too. This is a great time in which to have such experts as we have today, like Joe and Sasha and Congressman Burton, and with the United States Senator from the Foreign Affairs Committee. They need us, we need them. We need to help each other. So Dan, we're going to try to get a team of researchers behind you to, help, meet that proposal that you gave to Senator Young on the Chinese banks. I think that's really, really clear and very important. We thank you to all of our audience, and let's have a great week, and hopefully we'll stop this from ever becoming another nuclear test, which appears to be imminent. But I think with our efforts, we will make progress. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Bye-bye. Thank
you.
you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.